The first step for me for figuring out the stars was what was I going to use to make them. I tried experimenting a little with Thribra, which is the really smooth thermoplastic. I tried using Transpart, which is the transparent thermoplastic, and then I tried fooling around with some basic craft foam. None of them were getting me the look and feel that I was really wanting for Lulu, so I decided that I was going to cast it in colored resin. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through how I created the molds for the resin and then how I actually cast the resin itself. Step one is you have to make molds. In order to make a mold, you actually need a copy of the shape that you're actually going to be casting. For the case of the little stars, I actually found a tray in Joann's in the candy making section with stars that were actually the right shape and size that I wanted. So I just cut one of those off of the plastic tray, and that was the shape I was going to use. For the bigger star, I ran into a little bit of a problem. I suck at sculpting. So what I actually did was I drew the shape of the star that I wanted, and then I sculpted 1/5 of that star. I cast it in plastic to make 5 separate pieces, and then I put them together, and I used an epoxy known as green stuff. Green stuff is commonly used for tabletop wargaming if you're trying to fill in the gaps. So I basically took all 5 pieces of my plastic and I glued them onto a piece of craft foam, and then I basically used green stuff to fill in the gaps, and then I coated it with a layer of auto filler. You can find this in your section of Walmart or often like Lowe's or Home Depot, and it comes as a gray spray, and it's basically going to fill in the gaps, and it helped me get a really nice smooth surface. So it took me a little longer to get there, but in the end I got a star that was big enough and the shape that I wanted for the big stars in the costume. Once I had my shapes in place, the next thing is I have to actually make the mold. Now, there's 2 parts to this. One is you actually need a container to put your shape in and then to pour silicone over. Most of the time in our house, we actually just keep a random set of Lego bricks so we can try and build the shape that we needed, and then we just basically put a sheet of wax paper underneath and we tape it up so that none of the silicone leaks out. For the case of the big star, I actually grabbed a rectangular Tupperware container, which is a little bit bigger than this. But either way, once you've got kind of that rectangular shape, and then you can put your shape inside, then you have to get around to mixing silicone. So the silicone that I like to use is Moldstar 15. You can buy this for, I think it's around $30 on Amazon. It comes in a box. It has really nice instructions and kind of warnings all over the place. Make sure you don't get it on your hands. You might want to think about wearing a respirator. But basically, you mix equal parts of the formula together in a plastic cup, and then you pour it into your container over your shape. And then you let it cure, and curing can take anywhere from 4 hours. I usually try to make mine at night, and then I let them sit overnight so that tomorrow I'm able to work with it. So in the end, I got a really big silicone mold for the big star, and then I also had another one for the little star. Now the reason why I wanted to use silicone is anytime you're casting something, if you're casting something hard, you want to be, your mold should be something soft and squishy. So that way there's no friction when you try to pop it out. Not gonna lie, I actually tried using the candy mold the first time, and the stars got stuck in there because once the resin cured, it was hard, it got stuck in the hard mold. So I tried using the silicone molds moving forward. So that's the first part, is putting together your silicone molds. There's a whole bunch of tutorials online for how you're actually supposed to measure equal parts to get it to fit all over the place. If you're interested in learning more about that, or if you can't find a tutorial, just write me a comment or send me a ping on either Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, and I can kind of talk you through it or send some more instructions your way. Once you have the mold, then it actually gets time to casting the resin. So for mine, there were 2 pieces that I was worried about. One was the color, and then the other one was adding the sparkle. So I went out to my local store and I got some resin, which is naturally clear. And then I looked up some tutorials online for how to actually incorporate color. And one of the tutorials said, A really good way of adding color is if you actually get some oil paint in the color that you want, and then you basically have maybe a pea-sized amount for, say, a cup of resin. So what I did is I went and got some yellow oil paint, and then when I was mixing the two pieces together, because you'll notice that when you get the resin, it actually comes, again, with two pieces. One is kind of this gooey stuff that comes in this weird looking can, and then the other one is this catalyst. The majority of your resin is going to come from this bottle, and then you have to add a number of drops, and then this is what actually allows the resin to heat up and cure. Now, there will be instructions on the back of the box that will tell you how many drops of catalyst you should be putting into your shape. For me, the first time that I cast one of the stars, I had a little bit of a trouble because I was trying to figure out, well, what is the depth of the star? And so in my case, I decided to go with around maybe a 1/4 inch, because that was the widest part of the star. So essentially, I followed the instructions to pour the resin and to add the catalyst. Once that was done, I basically took the yellow oil paint, I put maybe like a pea-sized amount onto a wooden mixing stick, and then I slowly mixed it in. One of the things that I found out when I was adding in the paint is that it didn't mesh smoothly. So there were still chunks of paint actually floating around. And so I actually had to dig those out with the stick so that those didn't actually go into the mix. The other thing I wanted to do was incorporate a little bit of sparkle. And this was actually pretty easy. Once I had mixed in the paint, I just dumped a whole bunch of sparkle in and mixed that up as well. Once that was mixed, I poured it into the mold and then I let it sit. Now, one note about resin, more so than the silicone, is this generates lots of fumes. So you want to make sure that you're doing this in a well-ventilated area, especially if this has to wait several hours to cure. So what I ended up doing was in my bathroom, I actually have a vent that pumps out to the outside. So what I would do is I would go in there, I would make sure to wear my mask when I was working with it so that I didn't inhale the fumes, and then as it was curing, I would just leave the vent on. All of the harmful fumes would get pumped out to the outside. The other downside of the fumes is your house may end up smelling like nail polish remover if you don't do this. But seriously, don't let the fumes get to you. Once I had the stars casted, the next thing that I had to do was I had to create some sort of casing for them because they were just raw around the edges. So what I did was pretty simple. I got some sparkly paper, some shiny, very shiny sparkly paper from AC Moore, and I put it on the back. And the reason why you want to do this is because the star will allow some amount of light to go through. Now I understand I've added oil paint and I've added sparkle, so the amount of light that gets through is going to be significantly diminished. However, there's going to be just enough that you want to have something shiny on the back so that if the light gets through, you're going to maximize the amount of light that it catches and tries to bounce out, which is going to give you a little bit more of that glowing effect. The other piece is I just needed to make some sort of edging. And for that, all I did was I grabbed some craft foam and I sealed it and painted it gold, and then I just kind of put it on top so it was kind of nicely cased. And I did this for the headpiece and I did it for the chest, and then I also did that for the star on the staff. The only unique thing about the staff is I actually cast 2 stars, and then I glued them together, and then I made a casing around both of them, so it's kind of a star sandwich. And I did that so that we would have a proper star on each side of the staff. Before I put them in the casing, after I had added the backing to them, the other thing that I did was I actually sealed the top of the resin with a clear acrylic sealer. And I got this from my local AC Moore store, and it's basically got a high gloss factor. So one, this is going to seal the resin to help protect it, but the other thing that I found out is once you cast the resin, you may need to do a little bit of sanding to kind of take care of some of the edges, and that dulled it down just a little bit. So in order to bring back the shine, this kind of clear acrylic sealer will help with that as well. Another thing I forgot to mention was for the little stars, I didn't actually go whole hog and make a full foam casing. All I did was, once I put the backing on, I just kind of glued some gold beads around the edge so that you got the same effect of having the gold trim around the edges, but because they're so small, if I tried to do anything with craft foam, it's very likely that they would get overwhelmed with the shape.